Hey there. It's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the comment, thanks. Wednesday, June 18th. Our fourth evening here, Sarah's second straight day of chemo. Thank heavens that from now on she only has chemotherapy on MWF. No hurling yet, but you can tell it takes about everything out of her. Today, I'm wearing a matching yellow short and top set. But let's catch up on the past some more. Sarah didn't even stay up for supper, so I have the whole evening to write. Maybe I can get things caught up to date. The break. About 2 weeks after the girls had offered to give me a Halloween makeover, on a bright spring day, our world began to fall apart. Sarah and I had biked out to the same overlook where we first said, "I will love you forever." Again we sat there, ate a snack and sipped pop, and generally daydreamed and talked and kissed. When it was nearly time to start home, I slid off the rock ledge down onto the parking lot, about an 18-inch drop. I held my hand out for Sarah. She took my hand and jumped down, but as she landed, her right leg collapsed out from under her, and she went down, me hanging on to her, trying to help her keep her balance. I thought I heard a snapping noise. Sarah's face contorted and she shrieked. "Mark! My leg! I think it's broken, clear up on my thigh." She'd been complaining about pains in her thigh, but the doctor had assumed it was just tight muscles. Now her leg was bent at a weird angle. What could we do? It was 10 miles back to town. Fortunately, some tourists from Nebraska pulled in with their minivan. I flagged them down, and they used their cell phone to call the ambulance. "It'll be okay, don't worry, they'll fix it up," I chattered nervously, holding her hand. Tears ran down her face. She cried, "I never had anything hurt like this." It seemed like hours before the ambulance came. The nice people in the minivan followed, bringing our bikes. As we entered the emergency room, they took her back for x-rays. I told the staff what had happened, and then I called her family. Soon her mom and sister were there with me. Finally, Dr. Phillips came out, a worried look on his face. "She has a nasty break of her right femur, not at all consistent with such a short fall." "Are you sure nothing else happened?" I insisted that nothing had, other than the bike ride. I told about her earlier complaints of a sore thigh. "We were able to set the bone temporarily so it won't do any more damage, but there are some things on the x-rays that we don't like. She really needs to be seen by some pediatric orthopedic specialists at the university hospitals. I'd recommend the helicopter ambulance. There's too much potential for damage if we try to deal with it here, and I have concerns that something more serious may be involved." Within an hour, my sedated girlfriend was flying the 90 miles to our state university city, with her mom and sister with her. I drove the 90 miles in my old Jeep. I finally tracked down her family in the operating waiting room at the Children's Hospital next to the big university hospital. None of us could figure out how her leg would break so easily. After what seemed like hours and hours, a doctor came out in scrubs, and she ushered us into a tiny visiting room. "I'm Dr. Wilcox, Chief of Pediatric Orthopedics. Sarah's still on the operating table, but I need to talk with you before we go on. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but the leg broke because of a large bone tumor. It will be examined more closely in the labs, but I would be surprised if it wasn't malignant." At that, we all lost it. "Please," she said. "Things aren't as bad as they might seem. A few years ago, this would have meant an automatic amputation, partly to keep the cancer from spreading, and partly because the bone would be so damaged. So far, we've removed the obviously tumorous portion of the bone, and what we can see of the other parts of the tumor. What we propose to do is to replace the infarcted part of the bone with a titanium prosthetic femur that will go from mid-thigh to her knee. We anticipate that there will be some nerve damage, so the leg will never function quite as well as it used to, but she's young and strong, and will learn to compensate if you give her a lot of love and support. Of course, if the tests come back positive for malignancy, she will need chemotherapy to make sure we destroy the cancerous cells. As we asked questions, she tried to be reassuring. Yes, she would walk again, but with some slight difficulty. Yes, chances are great that if it was cancer, it was treatable, and she would likely live a long, productive life. She asked permission to continue with the bone replacement. Her folks signed the paper, and Dr. Wilcox left. We were stunned. We had no idea it was that serious. But at least she wouldn't lose her leg. As we waited for the completion of the surgery, we talked. I remember saying that no matter what happened, I'd be there for Sarah and for them. I know, Mark, Mrs. Holding said. What you and Sarah have is very special, more than just a boyfriend-girlfriend thing. You're really a part of our family. Then she cried. They cried. I cried. We hugged a soggy hug. Finally, Dr. Wilcox came out with good news and bad news. The prosthetic bone had been successfully attached to her own, and the tumorous portion was cleaned out. But preliminary tests confirmed that the tumor was cancerous. She introduced Dr. Hawkins, an oncologist, who explained the whole bit about chemotherapy. They would give Sarah a couple of weeks to heal, and then have a 6-week treatment regimen. They would do physical therapy at the same time. It would be demanding to do both together, because each one was exhausting, but not to begin the therapy would cause the leg to atrophy. Not to begin chemo could be deadly. Sarah didn't really come out of the anesthetic until the next day, and she was still sort of woozy. The doctors discussed the treatments ahead. Chemo, will I lose my hair? She asked. Sarah's not considered a real fox by most of my classmates. They have poor vision, I'd guess, but everyone agrees she has great hair, long, curly, thick, the color of ginger snaps. Dr. Hawkins explained gently that most patients with the treatment they were recommending lost all their hair. Since Sarah's hair was thick, she might retain some. But it would grow back, probably about a month after the treatment stopped. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. Mine too. I clutched her hand. Hey. It's okay. Bald and alive is better than the alternative. I'll still love you, no matter what. You know that. You'll always be beautiful to me. I had to drive back the next day because the end of school was coming up. Julie and her mother stayed on. As a senior, Julie had finished her classes early. It was hard to think about my coursework. I'm a good student, and my grades would hold up okay, but that wasn't important to me right now. Our principal convinced me that Sarah's being sick wouldn't cause her to flunk out either. She was excused from finals. The day finals was to begin, I got a call. Sarah was sick and had a high fever. I jumped in the Jeep and went, leaving Mom to call the principal to explain. When I got there, Sarah wasn't in her room. Neither was Julie or their mom. The nurse looked really concerned and directed me back to the waiting room. Julie and her mom looked like zombies, kind of gray-like and in shock. Julie mumbled. She's lost her leg. How? What happened? The docs had fixed the bone with the cancer. Please. No jokes. It can't be. Mrs. Holding took my hands and looked straight in my eye, tears streaming down her cheek. Mark, it wasn't just the cancer. She wasn't feeling good yesterday, and we just thought it was flu or something, since she's so weak. But her fever kept rising. Her leg was really hot. They pumped her full of antibiotics and kept running tests. It was a severe infection around the bone. Staff of some sort. They worked all night with it, but this morning they told us they would have to remove her leg or the infection would kill her. Her whole leg was toxic, full of poisons. Not just the new bone. Remove? Amputate? Dear God, no. How high up? At first, they thought about halfway down her thigh. But it was worse than they thought. They ended up taking the whole bone, clear up to the hip. It would have been better had they just cut it off earlier where the cancer was. At least she would have had something there. I could hardly conceive what that would be like. Will she walk again, ever? I mean, it doesn't sound like there's anything to attach an artificial leg to. How could such a wonderful girl have to spend her whole life in a wheelchair, or on crutches, with just a single leg? Memories of Sarah biking, dancing, running, leaping, filled my mind. Would they only be memories now? Mrs. Holding said that the doctor had told her that yes, they could give her a prosthetic leg. Even people who have had cancer in their hip, and who have lost their leg and part of their pelvis and hip have walked later. Of course, it would be more difficult. But she should be able to walk. She had been taken to the recovery room, and we got to go in and see her for a few minutes, wearing breathing masks. I thought I was going to throw up in it, when I saw how deathly pale she looked, and the way the sheet caved down alongside her left leg, now her lonely leg. I managed to keep my stomach under control. She drifted in and out again, then she looked at me and smiled. Hi. I'm glad you're here, Mark. Any excuse to get out of finals, I said. Sarah, no matter what happens, you're not going to get rid of me. I'll be there with you and for you. No matter what, okay? She just smiled and winced and drifted off. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment, thanks.